Thanks, Latika, and thanks, Vinod, for touching upon what we do here at ValueMomentum. Let me share my screen. Hope you are able to see my screen.
Yes.
So, yeah, thank you. IT journey through cloud is imperative. It is changing the whole IT landscape. So, digital cloud transformation is a very complex and a very lasting process. So it requires the expertise, resources, and the commitment. So the intent of this talk is to provide the path from the cloud chaos to the clarity. So when we talk of the journey through the cloud, you would have heard that cloud first. So when you hear cloud first as a acronym, right? Like it is not that you start building from the scratch and start working towards the cloud without putting across any thoughts through it. So when we look at the cloud first, it means that the foundation should be ready in order for a particular application or the product or the services to be successful. Having said this, let's get started. So today I'll be touching upon the strategy, assessment, and the design, migration, operate, and the optimize. So these are the set of the steps that we need to take in order for the cloud migration. So these I just wanted to bring the focus onto the top tech trends. So these are the few of the top tech trends as per the Gartner. So if you see in most of the things, either they are onto the cloud or the platform is powered by the cloud. So in any case, in order to adapt the new set of technology, in order to bring the business value to serve the customers better, cloud is being the part and parcel through the journey. Now bringing the focus back. So once when you consolidate or spend less time on the infrastructure, you will have the same time or the value to concentrate more on the business initiative. So when you concentrate more on the business initiative, you will get into a more innovative mode, which will help the company to be part of the competitiveness and have the competitive edge. So, through this journey, what are the biggest risks? The biggest risk is not knowing why we are getting onto a cloud, why this whole journey is necessary. And if we don't have a buy-in from the top executives, we will not have the commitment nor the resources. So we need to handle few of the aspects well in ahead before going through the journey, before starting this journey. So also we need a good, strong technical leadership, because when we look into any processes, we need to look at a larger scale, how it impacts the whole IT organization. And also when we are getting onto a new technology, there will be a technological gaps. And what is the prioritization? How do we do it? And when we get onto a cloud journey, costing is another aspect. So when you're looking into a large scale transformation, so parallelly, we will be building few things onto the cloud, and we will also be having few things running on-prem. So initially the cost will be more. So we should be very cognizant of the fact that this is a temporary, and this is one of the risk. And also security. Security needs to be designed well in advance, and also the performance. So these are the few of the biggest risks for this journey. So now let's go through each steps for this migration process. Let's start with the strategy. So when we this phase is a very beginning, and this is a very fundamental and very important phase for this journey. So we need to understand the business value, and we need to understand the need of setting up the cloud business office. What is the total cost of this journey? How do we go about? And what is the governance? And when we're talking about the strategy, we also need to focus more on the people, the gaps. How do we leverage the different partners who could help us with the journey, who has been doing this continuously and have the best practices towards it. So when it comes to a business value, there are so many varieties and the combination of the things that can be achieved. So most of the people get onto the cloud for the elasticity, scalability that the cloud offers, and This also will help us moving from the capex model to the opex, and it also can be, like how do you launch your new set of services or the business, and how do we get on to the cost reduction. And it also helps us in modernizing few of the application digital transformation. How do we build the resiliency when we get onto the cloud? So these are the few of the business value of this particular journey. So we need to understand what are those business value, and accordingly we will be able to help and see what are the right models that would help us through this journey. When we look into bringing in any technology or any process or any new introduction of the things, we will touch upon three important aspects. One is the bringing in the technology. What kind of a technology and how does it impact the existing landscape of the IT? And when we bring in the new technology, accordingly the process will change. So when the technology and the process will change, it also needs to change the skill set of the people, the culture change needs to get in. So we need to address all these three pillars. Coming to the cloud business office, it mainly has three pillars. One is the governance, brokerage, and the community. The governance part, when we always hear the governance, it is not all about the red taping. So ideally, the traditionally, whenever we hear the governance, we see that it is the bureaucracy way of doing the things. But governance is very important in order for us to see how we can empower and enable the organization to maximize the cloud value, and also avoiding the costly mistakes during this process. So we need to have a right policies in place, the guidelines, the guardrails, what are the services and the tools that needs to be in place even before we get started. So this is one of the very important pillar. So once you have a governance in place, we need to see who would be the right provider. There are so many cloud providers in market. So to suit our needs and the demands, who would be the right cloud provider? So have the right selection, understand the solution architecture towards leveraging the cloud service provider. Then once you have identified the cloud service provider, we need to look into the community. What kind of a community does the cloud service provider provides? The use cases, the case study, collaborate with the different set of people, whether the partners or the cloud service provider or internal technical leadership team. And how do we get into the knowledge sharing and the training aspect? So when we create a governance in place, governance is a continuous process. Once you create the policies, guardrail, all the necessary aspects related to the governance. So once the governance is set in place, see what are the kind of the violation or something can be improved. Then work towards the optimizing those policies. So this is a continuous process. It's not that during the strategy time you have formed your governance and you leave it at there. No, this is a evolving process. What is here? So when you are migrating to a cloud, having the visibility in the costing aspect is very important. How do you look into the costing aspect? See what is the kind of application or the business process or a particular layers of the things that you are planning to migrate to a cloud. Have it audited and see and calculate what is the existing cost and how much it would cost you onto the cloud, and also get your options weighed, which cloud provider will cost for a particular audited IT infrastructure that you want to migrate. So this would also give you another way of evaluating the different cloud providers. So the phase 2 is the assessment. So during the assessment, we will look into the various steps. It is more of a step 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the we should follow this in the same similar manner. First, we will get into the application discovery and the portfolio management. So towards it, what we will do is we will look into the existing CMDB data. Sometimes, most of the enterprise have the CMDB data, but sometimes it will not be present during the time. If the things are not there, then we need to use a discovery tool. So discovery tool, each of the cloud service provider have their own discovery tool. There are few others in the market that you need to leverage to get the all the applications and their set of the dependencies to be mapped out. So once you have the relevant information about an application, you assess your portfolio and you see from the your assessment, what is the present state of those applications or the services or the dependencies. Because sometimes if things are not relevant, it needs to be a sunset. So we need to have a clarity towards it. Then once you have all the details in place, then we need to bucketize the set of the technology. Technology in terms of the web application, what is the methodology, or how do you migrate? How do you migrate your databases? Sometimes for few of the databases, we need to convert the schemas and then take it ahead. Then we need to look into the actual migration tool, which should help us in the migration. And we'll also look into how do we get into a different migration methodologies. So for the application discovery, primarily we will be using the CMDB. If the CMDB data is not sufficient, we'll bring in the discovery tool. We also leverage the application portfolio management. And many a times it would also require that we need to get this data and have it audited and have the set of discussion with the application owners to have the more clarity towards it. And for the portfolio assessment, we need to have much more information about the application discovery aspect when it comes to the OS. What kind of OS do we have? What kind of a database do we have? What is the kind of backup and the recovery strategy we are presently having? So we need to understand all the aspects of the application and as well as the surrounding infrastructure and the platform that powers the application. So once we have the uh, different portfolio assessment being done, the application discovery information, we need to get into assessing the current state, where that particular application stands, how much of a business priority it holds. So this can be done with a few set of additional questionnaire to understand the application and the business value it brings in with the stakeholder. So once we understand what is the business priority and what is the life cycle of that particular application, do we need to go ahead? Do we need to retire? With that kind of information, we need to get into the bucketization of the technology. So when we are getting into the bucketization, we can look into a technology way or the a functional area or the OS. So once we get into bucketization, we will look into the migration approaches for each of the bucketized item. So for the migration tool, there for a lot of cloud service provider, they have their migration tools. Leverage as much as the cloud native tools of the particular the cloud service provider, because it will be more tested and guaranteed way of doing things. So once we have all the right data in place, we need to look at for each of the application or the functional areas, what would be the migration path. So migration paths can be, it is called as a 6 Rs. Do we need to rehost the application or the repurchase, or we need to re-platform, refactor. Re-engineer is the most recommended way, but it has its own life cycle and it is little more complex to attend, but it is more towards you're re-architecting your whole application to be cloud enabled or retaining as it is. So most of the companies to start with, they will go into the lift and shift model. So once we have through the phase 2, we'll get into the design. So with detailed assessment as our input to the design phase, we'll look into the transformation map. How do we transform each of the bucketized item? So we will have the target architecture ready. For the particular target architecture, we will look into what is the infrastructure design And based on the infrastructure design, we will look into what are the services that needs to be provisioned, and getting onto the whole 9 yards of the the execution of the project and handling it to the PMO team. Then once application is ready, we will get into a next mode of the DevOps process and the operating model, the change management. So all these aspects needs to be handled. So when you start your cloud journey, there are few things that needs to be done when you are actually getting into the design phase. Is how do you design your landing zone? So the landing zone, it again depends upon your organization structure, how you are breaking your organization into different uh, products, or it in terms of the technology, and accordingly how do you want to design your organization unit into the cloud, and what are the services that needs to be part of for each of the organization unit, what are your security controls. So all these aspects needs to be there even before we get on to the implementation phase. And we also need to design the network topology, like are you what is the mode of operations you are going, are you getting onto a complete cloud mode, are you getting into a hybrid mode, are you getting onto a multi cloud approaches. Based on that, the way you configure your network and for the communication between your private data center onto the public or the multiple public cloud service provider. So we need to have that understanding and decide and work towards the connectivity aspect, and also look into the storage and the compute, how we can leverage the cloud platform towards it. So once we have, so when you are deciding on to the first few migration projects, it is very important that we know exactly what are the performance metrics that will measure this migration of a particular application or the project. So get your best team in place, see what are the skill set that are required, and plan it well. So cloud operating model, when you get onto a cloud, the way you operate on-prem and the cloud, it changes. So things on cloud are much more simpler, provided that for each of the services, what is the right way of doing things so that you don't have a misconfigurations. So you need to look into the various aspects. So when you look into the cloud operating mode, many a times we will look at the application operations, infrastructure engineering. So eventually, as enterprise get onto a much more maturity of doing things, lot of these boundaries between the application and the infrastructure operations, it will get blurred. Now, getting into a change management, in most of the organization, when it comes to a change management, ITIL is widely used. So when we are bringing in the cloud change management, we need to understand the cloud adoption framework, so that we need to enhance the existing IT process to handle the cloud changes. So we will be mostly looking at the how do we automate the a lot of the configuration items in case of any unfortunate incidents, what are the operative way of remediating those incidents. So few of the the change management processes, a few of the steps are like how do you prepare for your change. You identify the the all the stakeholders, the impacted to the services or the application, the downstream application, upstream application, have them notified about this particular change that is happening. Select your executive sponsors, have a strategy in place, like what is the downtime, what are the steps you need to do in order to effectively do a change management, and also reverting back in case something doesn't work as per the plan. Then look into the managing the change itself. So you have a training plan and create a communication plan, and enforce the change. So once the change is being done, how do you track the performance of it, whether you are achieving what needs to be done as a part of that change scope. And once the change is implemented, see whether it is working, track the performance, see whether the change what is being done is being successful, and communicate the success factor. So getting into the project management, so like for any of the the project management aspect for any application that needs to be migrated, understanding of the existing infrastructure or the set of way of doing things, the understanding existing architecture, and how do you map it to the cloud, and whether for leveraging those set of services onto the cloud, do we have those services being provisioned? Do we have you has it been vetted? Do you have a guidelines for it? So get your understanding and have the readiness prepared. Understand your downstream and the upstream application so that when you do the migration, the impact should be very minimal, and that the impact should also be accounted for. And also establish what are your performance metrics. How do you measure this particular change and the success of it? So this is the sample template. So now after the design, we need to get into the actual migration mode. So when we have a design in place, we would have already understood the existing architecture of an application, the way it is, and the future plan, and how it is going to be on the cloud. So based on that particular design, you provision the required resources, have the migrate your application code, data, file, all the set of the necessary dependencies that are required, and integrate with the existing application, integrate with your identity provider, validate whether things are working. Once things have been working, you need to get into the optimization mode. And in case of any incidents or anything, have your operation model defined, like how do you get back to the normalcy of working things. So have this plan in place, migrate your application. So once you migrate your application, we need to look into the operations and the optimization. So when we get into optimization mode, we will look into how do we automate a lot of stuffs, like the database backups. How do you take the backups of your the storage? How do you harden your OS? And how do you leverage your AI into the operations? How do you manage your IT? Once you migrate your application, look into the costing aspect. Is there a way that we can optimize the cost? How do you have a more insight into your application and the performance, how the data is flowing? Do you need to have a much more capacity in place? So getting the insight onto the platform and the application will really help you in the scalability of the applications and the platforms. So through this journey, there are few aspects. Those are the challenges that we need to address. So when we are performing the migration, we need to see whether we have a right technical skill set in the team. If we don't have, how do we partner with the individual cloud service provider to get the right knowledge in place, and parallelly work with your existing team, partner with your cloud service provider partners in order to gain those expertise and the skill set. Do your enough groundwork, do your assessment of your application to see how to understand how does it perform on-prem from where you will be migrating, and what are the performance metrics that you will be looking at. And also look at what is the downtime during this migration. Try to keep it as minimum as possible. Look into the aspect so that you don't have a data loss during this migration. And also you need to look into the interoperability once you have migrated your application onto the cloud. With this, we'll move on to the optimization and the automation. So when you are moving to a cloud, whether it is respect to your the provisioning of your VMs, the storage, or anything, So first you analyze what is the existing capacity, what is being used, because when you move to a cloud, you don't have to over provision or the under provision. You can look into the right provisioning, and in case if anything is required, we can auto scale the resources. And resource and cost optimization, knowing the existing the storage or the present infrastructure and how much is being leveraged will help us into the cost optimization. And plan your DR well. And in case of the security, when we get on to the security first, we need to have the identity management in place, have the right set of the guardrails in place when you're designing your landing zones. Once the security is being taken care, you need to have the continuous scanning and monitoring in case of there is any breach or how we can enhance the security. Then getting onto the infrastructure as a code or improvising onto your DevOps process or DevSecOps. So this requires the continuous improvement of doing things. So, touching upon the cost management, it's all about the right sizing of your infrastructure, right sizing of any of the services that you are provisioning from the cloud, and you can, as per your how you the number of requests comes in, you can scale up and down. In case for the development environment, you don't need to keep the environment up and running 24/7. In that case, you can look at powering those set of VMs or the infrastructure only during the developers work timings. So all this automation can be done in order to effectively optimize the cost. So when we look into the observability is a very important aspect. So how do you leverage the data captured across various services? How do you process it? How do you, have the intelligent automation in place in order to deliver your service level objectives across the organization? So, so capturing the data and
you have 10 minutes left in your session.
Yeah, thanks, Latika. I think I'll be done by then. Thank you. So now getting on to the operations. So once you have looked into your design, the cost efficiency, we also need to look into the operations. How do we the meet the service level agreements? Are we planning the right kind of the backups and the recovery mechanism? What are the the business value the particular application is providing? Accordingly, we can have our operations. If few of the application needs to be on highly available, then we need to design our application to be in active mode, and accordingly we need to be very vigilant about our operations, need to have our the tracing, monitoring and alerting in place. So when it comes to a cloud, like once you are done with the migration, so are we done with the migration and we are good? I don't think so, because with any technology or anything, right, there is always a more scope of improvement, and it's more so with the cloud, because every 6 months, I think every a couple of months, we will have a new set of services or the technology or the features that will be hosted on, like people will come up with the new processes. So we need to see and keep our eyes open so that we can leverage the new set of services. How do we leverage those aspects in order to define our processes and add much more business value, and how do we add more value to our customers? And given the amount of changes that is required to get onto a cloud, so there might be a questions that is the cloud really necessary? given that, like over the past 70 years of the data, in the S&P, most of the organization lifespan used to be around 30 to 40 years, but now it has come down to 15. So how do we be relevant and, add the competitive advantage to our businesses? I don't think that, without a technology and without a cloud, we will be able to have that competitive advantage. And in case if you want to uh, have a second eye on your cloud migration project, you can always approach us. We will always take a look and advise on how we can do things better and faster. Thank you.
Thanks, Shilpa. We have a few questions based on the session. I'll read it for you. So the first question is there any standard digital acceleration roadmap or strategy to follow?
So we have already like touched upon the strategy. So first you need to before any starting, right, first understand what is the business value that you are trying to bring in when you're getting started. Have the foundation of your cloud ready before you actually start working on the cloud or even migrating your existing application onto the cloud. So a few important aspects that you need to touch upon is the business value that you are going to gain. And also, do you have the cloud foundation ready? And do you have a buy-in from your executives? These are the few important aspects that you need to consider.
Thanks, Shilpa. The second question is, what is the difference between digital transformation and digital acceleration?
So the acceleration is more towards how do you do the things faster. And in case when you talk to any of the partners, they would have had the particular roadmaps. How do you get your journey accelerated either into a cloud or into a DevOps or into the application development?
Thanks, Shilpa. The next question is, how do we choose between Azure versus Google Cloud versus AWS? Is it based on the client budget, and are there any specific difference on high level that we need to consider?
So it again depends upon lot many things. One is you need to understand your IT landscape, what it is, and how you'll be like, and also the costing aspect, and also based on like I I cannot really at this forum I'll not be able to tell that favor one of the cloud provider, but you need to look at the costing and the services that each of them are providing. I think these are the few of the aspect that you need to consider before choosing. And also primarily you need to understand your landscape and what are the services or the application that you are planning to take it to the cloud.
Thanks, Shilpa. The next question is, do you think COVID-19 is the catalyst for the rise of the digital acceleration?
Yeah, I think yes, it has really helped because when the COVID-19 started and a lot of people, like, it was a lot of disruption for everyone. I think we all can resonate well to it, and more so towards when it comes to organization, they want to build more resilient and need to get into a more scalability, high availability aspect of the things. So getting achieving all those things in a most cost effective and with a lesser time, I don't think that it is possible with the private data center or in-house data center. So getting onto a cloud is really important. And it did help a lot of organizations to think through what they need to do and achieve the business value in much more efficient way and the faster way. It has really brought in a lot of thought process towards it, and a lot of them are adopting cloud.
Yes, Shilpa, thanks. The next question is, what is lift and shift model in Azure?
So lift and see, when I call it as a lift and shift model in Azure, it can be on any of the cloud platform. Lift and shift is like you take your existing VM, you migrate your entire VM without analysis and without looking into how much of a resources is being used. So not getting into more of the optimized way of doing things. But if you want to really like, if you for some reason you want to migrate a lot of VMs or your from your in-house data center to a cloud, lift and shift is the first approach, but it will not bring you any cloud advantage. Just that the migration will be seamless in case if you are looking at sunsetting your existing data center. But to really have the leveraging the cloud, I would really prefer to have a re-architected way of doing things so that you can build your application or the product for the cloud readiness in order to leverage all the the offerings of the cloud.
Thank you, Shilpa. Thanks for sharing your deep knowledge and expertise with us on digital acceleration through cloud. Indeed, digital change has become the new normal. This session was really an insightful one. Thank you.
Thank you, Rika.